Ellen Argenzio. If you can, come to stand. Okay. Yes. And I want to say thank you to Joan and Ellen for taking the time and effort to be here tonight and so graciously sharing Joe with us. So I would love to have you, or Mom, if you care to, say a couple of hopefully kind words about Joe.
Good.
Good.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. And
Pleasure.
first, I'd like to thank Jan and Bobby and members of the LOW Veterans Committee for honoring my dad today and inviting us to speak on behalf of my family. I'm humbled standing here in a room of veterans. Thank you all for your service. Today marks the 82nd anniversary of the Allied landing in Normandy, D-Day. Most World War II veterans never told their families what they went through, what they saw. The war was over. They came home, they found a job, they married, bought a house, raised their children. They built lives, moved on, and kept the war mostly to themselves. A little background, my dad was born June 8, 1927 in Manhattan, New York. His dad, Joe Sr., was a World War I veteran, a veteran of the Big Red One. His dad and his mother, Jenny, were very involved in the American Legion. My dad learned to play the drums in the Sons of the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps. They had a good life. Then Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. All Dad's friends enlisted. He was the youngest of all his friends, and he was ready to join as well. But he was only 16. So he decided to doctor his birth certificate. He went to the Marines, they told him to get lost. He went to the Navy, they told him the same thing, get out of here. But the Army was more accepting of his doctorate certificate. He went through very basic training upon arriving in England and became a last-minute replacement for the upcoming invasion. He was assigned to the 1st Division, the Big Red One, the same division his father had served with. He was in the 16th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Battalion, Company M. His commander immediately believed he was too young and attempted to have him removed, but it was too late. The marshalling area was being locked down and preparations made to board the transport ships for the invasion. His first real wartime experience came on D-Day. He sailed across the channel on the Empire Anvil, and before dawn broke, he was ordered to go over the side into the landing craft. He had no training in climbing down the cargo nets, particularly in the dark, choppy seas. But he made it safely, saying his Hail Marys all the way down. I'll have a few more information on my dad's baptism under fire in a few minutes, but Omaha Beach was in chaos and the landing stalled, but men and individual units reorganized. In his area, they reorganized under the cliffs on Fox Red. My dad would join one group of men and help capture one of the German strongholds, WN-60, which had a commanding position of fire over the beach and the F1 draw. He would spend the first night in the little hamlet of Grand Hamo, not far inland, with remnants of K and L companies, fighting off German counterattacks. He would spend the first 3 days with these units until being directed back to his assigned company. They assumed that he had been killed or wounded on Omaha Beach. After D-Day, he fought his way across France, then Aachen, and the Hürtgen Forest, where he lost many of his friends. And then the Battle of the Bulge and the Rhine crossing. He was wounded twice, both times by German 88s. The first in France, after which he was evacuated to England for care and then returned for duty. He was wounded again in Germany. He would carry shrapnel in his legs and back the rest of his life. Their campaign ultimately ended with the liberation of the concentration camp at Falkenau, Czechoslovakia. It was at Falkenau that he really saw the cruelty of man's inhumanity to man, a nightmare he would never forget. It was at Falkenau that they learned the war was over and they met up with the Russians. He didn't have enough points to go home yet, so he remained in the army. They were moved to Bamberg, Germany, and Dad received orders to report to the regimental headquarters. He was told they were forming a 16th Infantry Band, Drum and Bugle Corps. They knew he had band experience and wanted him for the band. That's where he spent the rest of his time overseas until he got out in July 1946. So, how did the experience of being a young teenage soldier, being part of all the carnage and seeing the cruelty of war affect him when it was time to come home? Life moved on. He moved back with his parents. After 3 weeks of being home, it was suggested he find a job, and it really wasn't a suggestion. He worked at the Brooklyn Army Base, where they had just started an American Graves Division. They had to bring the dead from the war home, and so his job would be to check the names on the caskets as they came off the ships, make sure that the name matched with the manifest, and then make arrangements for the Army Guards to escort the casket to their home. In 1947, there was a big American Legion convention and parade in New York City. Dad was parading with the American Legion band while his father marched behind with the veterans. There, after the parade, Dad ended up in a nearby bar, and that's where he met Joan Ryan. Where did I meet you? Oh, it was a bar.
Stay out of bars.
They were married shortly after and lived in Brooklyn, where my brother Peter was born. Thanks to the GI Bill, Dad went back to school and eventually moved to a new position with the Office of Transportation, learning about commercial traffic, railroads, airlines, and so forth. This became his future as he eventually became the Chief of Transportation for the U.S. Department of State. His office was right across from the World Trade Center. My sister Debbie came next, and they moved to an apartment in Maspeth, New York, where I was born. It was getting a little tight, so it was time to leave the city. They bought a house in Baldwin, Long Island, and my sister Joan was born there, and life moved on. Dad joined the volunteer fire department in '63. He also became an instructor for local drum and bugle corps to help with the family budget. He became the director of the Baldwin Fire Department Drum and Bugle Corps, of which all 3 of his girls participated in at one time or another. For my part, as a young kid, I knew my dad was in the Army in World War II, but I really had no idea of what he went through until much later. There was his Army portrait hanging in our living room, and this was created in Germany in exchange for 2 packs of cigarettes. And that portrait is in the back there. He had sent it home to his mother and father, and it proudly hung in their home until their passing, and then it was in our home. He never openly spoke about his time in the service, but as I was growing up, I always caught onto little things he would say. For example, we lived on Long Island, we were minutes away from the beach, and yet he never wanted to go. And I said to him one time, like, why don't you want to ever go to the beach? And he's like, I've seen enough of the beach. You go and enjoy. It's like, oh, okay. Then another time I was up in my room and I looked out in the backyard and there was my dad sitting on the lawn and he had a big pool cover and he looked like he was sewing it. I'm like, he's sewing it? I had to go down and see this for myself. I brought my camera. I was like, I went down and there he was sewing the pool cover. I said, when did you learn to sew? And he's like, in the Army. I said, what did you have to sew in the Army? I'm something battles and everything else. He's like, you had to sew your socks, you had to sew on your patches. It's like, nobody's gonna do it for you, kid. You had to do it yourself. Oh, I actually have that picture. It's in the back there on one of the tables. You'll see him sitting there in the grass looking up going, what? And also, he had a friend, his name was Mr. Bourgeois, and I always noticed that he had a limp. And one time I saw him, he was walking with a particular limp, and I asked my dad about it. And he said, well, he was in Patton's Third Army. He was shot in the foot, and he lost a couple of toes off his foot, so he was limping for the rest of his life. Okay. I learned that one of my friends on our street had parents with tattoos on their arms that were received during World War II. They were purplish numbers. And when I asked my dad about the tattoos, he explained to me that because they were Jewish, they were identification numbers received in concentration camps. He mentioned being a part of liberating a concentration camp. But when I started to ask more questions, he said, you don't really want to know about that. I think at the time I was too young to understand, and I don't think he really wanted to go back there yet. But as I got older, he opened up more and more. We were watching a series of World War II interviews, and as one particular interview, a veteran was speaking, and I could see my dad getting agitated. And I could hear grunts and groans every once in a while. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, this guy's talking like he won the war all by himself. So the more inconsistencies he heard, the more he opened up to explain what actually happened. One day he was in the basement, we were both down there, and he was cleaning up a box of his Army items. He showed me his helmet, his sewing kit, and some other items, and explained what they were. I happened to pick up a knife that was in a sheath, and I was looking at it, and I noticed there were notches on the handle. And he looked over, and he quickly grabbed it out of my hand. He's like, give me that. He didn't have to tell me what the notches were. I knew. He told me about landing on the beach on D-Day. He was told to go to the back of the landing craft. Not knowing what to expect, he told the soldiers next to him that he was glad that he was with veterans. And one replied, kid, when that door goes down, you're going to be a veteran too. His boat hit an obstacle Germans had put in the water to catch the boats. Like they dumped everything in the water, railroad track, etc. And so the ramp was dropped and the guys in the front were killed right away. Someone yelled, go over the side, and he jumped in, wearing this watch I'm wearing today.
Oh, wow.
And he sank right to the bottom. He lost his helmet, his garbine, his ammunition cans. So he bobbed up and down along the bottom until he could stand. Meanwhile, the soldiers were being killed all around him. He made it to a point where he figured he could run, and he zigzagged, slipping on the wet stones, tripping and falling until he made it to the seawall. Someone gave him his first cigarette. They were supposed to land on Fox Green, but wound up on Fox Red, one of the heavily fortified German areas. He had to return to the exposed beach to retrieve a new rifle, helmet, and some ammunition. He also helped pull wounded men to cover, making repeated trips back out onto the exposed beach, and later he would be awarded the Bronze Star for those efforts. That's when I really understood about him not wanting to go to Jones Beach. When I saw the movie Private Ryan, I almost couldn't breathe when I saw the soldier go over the side of the landing craft. The bullets were shooting down through the water while the soldier bobbed up and down along the bottom, attempting to make it to the beach. It was exactly as my dad had explained his experience to me. And I was with my husband, and I actually leaned into him at the time. I said, God, that's what my dad exactly, this is his story. It was years later that I found out that exact scene in the movie was taken directly from my dad's interviews. I was curious why the veterans who actually lived through this hell weren't acknowledged in the movie credits, so I did some research. And I read Spielberg wanted to make Saving Private Ryan as authentic as possible and hired 2 writers to do uncredited rewrites based on research and interviews with veterans. Spielberg based these sequences on first-hand accounts from these veterans, and military historians praised its authenticity. The terror, confusion, and chaos of the landing, amplified by deafening sound design and handheld camera work, actually accurately reflect on what many soldiers experienced on June 6, 1944. So, while a mix of individual veteran stories and interviews were used in the film, none of them were ever credited in the movie. What they received were Saving Private Ryan t-shirts. Yeah. The Big Red One movie, I don't know if any of you ever saw it, but it was written and directed by Sam Fuller, who served in the same regiment as my dad. The scene from the Falkenau death camp, where the German soldier was hiding in an oven, was Hollywood taking liberties, but captured the rage the GIs felt by then, particularly with the SS. So Dad retired from the State Department in 1994. Mom and Dad moved to Lake of the Woods. On one excursion, we visited the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. We were admiring the memorial, the soldier statues, they were running through the water and the sand, when we heard sharp cracks like bullets hitting the water, and it looked like shells hitting the water. We weren't expecting it, and Dad just stood there for a minute, and he walked away. Dad loved to golf, and golf as often as he could. He joined the Lake of the Woods Veterans Club, the Lake of the Woods Fire and Rescue Department. He even took on overseeing the July 4th parades. He spoke at local veterans groups, and then he was invited to speak to students in schools, which is really where he shined and where he really wanted to be. His goal for these young students to learn and appreciate the true sacrifices others made to ensure their freedoms, especially those who did not make it home. The MAAs, the disabled soldiers. He made it a point that he was not there to be considered the hero, but to honor the men and women who fought for our country, to never forget those who gave their lives in service to our country so the rest of us could live in freedom and security. His sincerity spoke to these kids. Students loved and respected him and wrote many letters of true appreciation and thanks. His speaking engagements grew to the more formal interviews with college students and professional journalists. He is mentioned in many World War II books. There were interviews with history teachers in France who were teaching their students about World War II and D-Day. There is a book in the back that was created by one of the French teachers, And it is written on one side, it's in French, on the other side, it's in English, and it's filled with a bunch of pictures. It's really fantastic if you want to look at it. In preparation for the World War II Memorial Day dedication in May of 2004, he was interviewed for the opening day video. I didn't know about the interview, so it was a big surprise when he and other veterans were shown on the large screens surrounding the dais on the National Mall. He was also the Virginia State Representative for the World War II Memorial Parade. In 2008, in recognition of his participation in the invasion of Normandy, Dad was awarded the French Legion of Honor medal at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. Mom and Dad had many years of contentment and happiness here at Lake of the Woods. He was a father of 4, grandfather of 7, and a great-grandfather of 2 when he passed away April 17, 2010. He rests in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. To say that I am proud to be his daughter is an understatement. He taught by example and lived by the tenet, God, family, country. He was a huge influence on my 2 kids, Ryan and Katie. So much that both of my kids used him in essays as the most influential person in their lives. I'd like to finish tonight with words written about their grandpa by my son Ryan. And by the way, before I forget to mention, the first time Dad went back to Normandy, he brought back sand. And this is the actual sand from the beach on Omaha Beach. So, to my grandfather and VIP in my life, Joseph Orgenzio, who has helped me so much through life. My VIP. One of the very important people in my life is my grandfather, Joseph Orgenzio. There are so many things about him I want to describe, and I don't know where to start. He has brownish gray hair and big brown eyes. His hair is always neatly combed as a newly cleaned room, and he always wears it in a trademark puff in front. His eyebrows always move according to what he's saying. And just to describe him, he's about 5 feet 7 inches tall. He's very kind and always thinks of someone before him. He has a very humorous personality. He always laughs, makes a lot of friends fast, and loves to tell jokes. Though he is funny, he does get serious at times that he needs to. During an interview for school where I had to ask him about his past, I realized that the serious side of him came out more often than I thought. After certain questions, I witnessed him occasionally wincing, his eyes closing tightly in emotional pain, as he described old friends that had died gloriously in the past battles of the Great World War II. I have known him all my life and have been intrigued by his life all along. You can always tell when he's near, especially on the weekends, because sometimes he smells faintly of the grass of the golf course, so near his home, which he visits whenever he can. I am thankful that my grandfather has taught me so much. In almost every story he tells, he includes a moral or a lesson in it. One lesson he taught me recently was to listen and respect my parents, because one day they will be gone forever, and I will have to turn to my sister. I didn't particularly like the idea of getting help from my sister, so I took the advice. My grandfather believes that everyone should be treated equally and should have a fair chance for everything. He believes in whole families that are together and loves to play with children. He always attends big sports games I play in, and he also attends events like concerts for me.